Hey guys, this is Jerry. I have a really cool guest. I took an acting class from him back in the day. His name is Alan Gordon, and he runs a studio in New York, Alan Gordon Studios. So Alan, welcome.
Hi Jerry, how are you?
Yep, so this is him, and I'm gonna set the camera down just for simplicity. I'm good, Alan. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jerry, thanks.
So tell me about your journey. How did you get started teaching people how to act?
Well, I started acting in college. I was writing what we called back then, we referred to them as vignettes. Today it's called improv. They were loosely written, and then we would perform for an audience. And from there, after I graduated college, one of the guys that I worked with, this guy Josh, I can't remember his last name offhand, said he wanted to produce a show. At the time, they were doing these underground television shows. So we got a group of people that worked together in college, myself, Josh, and a few others, and we worked on some material. We improv'd it, we filmed it, and then it played in Manhattan briefly for a short period of time. It was called Video Madness. I don't even know if anybody even has it anymore. It's probably with the archives, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, somewhere underground, buried amongst thousands of useless pieces of debris.
So you got your start with improv, which is very interesting. Did a friend get you into improv, or was it one of those things where it's like you just saw some banner or something, you went?
No, actually, I was in Kingsborough Community College at the time, and from the time I was, what's the old expression, knee-high to a grasshopper, I had a bit of the performer in me. My father was in vaudeville, and he passed that along to me. We used to sit and watch together, movies together on TV, or go to movie theaters with my brother, and my father would point out all the people that he had known in Hollywood. He owned a couple of clubs when he was out there, and so he'd point people out, and my brother and I would get very excited and interested, and we'd go to movies and so on and so forth, and we got interested in performing.
Wow.
And when I got to college, I was still a bit of a, what they called a class comedian back in the day. I was making people laugh all the time, and I was performing in one way or another, and a friend of mine came up to me, and he's the one that said, listen, I know this guy, that he's looking for talent. He's at Brooklyn College, and how would you like to get involved with his improv group? And I said, that sounds great. So I contacted him, and that's when I started acting back then. And as I said, that led to the Video Madness show that I did. And then it was quite a while after that before I performed again.
I see. So who among the vaudeville people were your sort of the favorite people you watched back when you were a kid? Well,
I didn't watch them. It was really way before my time. But my father, he worked with people like George Jessel, who was an old-timer. When he was out in California, he didn't work with him, but he hobnobbed every now and again with people like Al Jolson.
I see.
And,
wow.
he knew a number of people on the vaudeville circuit. He wasn't there long, but he tried his hand at it. And he's more than a bit of a ham, my dad. And he liked to sing and dance. Every time he got a chance to do it, he would. My brother used to joke that every time my father opened up the refrigerator and the little light went on, he went into a song and dance. So
that's pretty cool.
He was a character.
I see. So you got that performer bug in you starting from a young age.
Yeah, I did.
Nice, nice. And did your brother end up doing artistic stuff too?
Not really. At one point, my father was involved with selling special effects equipment to the networks. So he knew some people there, and eventually my brother became a cameraman and worked on soap operas for a brief time, but he decided that's not the direction that he wanted to go in, and he ended up working in the social work field, and then he got his doctorate in psychotherapy.
Interesting. Cool. And so then you did Video Madness, and then did you go about it in New York for a bit, or what was your journey after that?
Well, everything was in New York. That's where I was born and raised. So as I said, I began at Brooklyn College, and then we did the Video Madness show. And then there was a hiatus because I was also going to school, and I was a musician, a drummer.
Oh.
And I was playing semi-professionally. And at one point, I had gotten away from all these things, and it was my wife, actually, that said to me one day, you need to do something for yourself, because I had really gotten away from some of my roots. And so I decided to take the plunge and start acting classes. I wanted some formal training. And that's when I was probably in my mid to late 30s when I began to train. And from there I started to audition, and I picked up roles in off-Broadway indie films, you know, a couple of episodes of Law and Order here and there, now defunct soap opera. So I did little bits and pieces of work. And oddly enough, I was, at the same time that I was studying acting, I was falling in love with teaching. And I got that from a teacher that I worked with. Tim Phillips was really my one and only teacher. He's a brilliant teacher. And he had so much fun teaching. And I used to love to attend the classes and watch him interact with the students. And little by little, I started picking up students on the side. And that's how I segued into teaching.
I see. I see. Now, so you were always Meisner trained, right?
No, not always. When I started out, there was one guy I worked with who was eclectic, but he was too eclectic. He was so eclectic that he didn't have any method. So, but there were bits and pieces of Meisner in there. And by the time that I got to Tim, he's the one that really introduced me to the Meisner technique. That was his background. And I really learned everything from him.
Oh, I see. Very interesting. Now, for people unfamiliar, what does the Meisner method entail in very sort of intro terms?
Okay, well, Meisner was one of the original members of the group theater. Group theater was founded in 1931. It lasted about 10 years. And there were 5 really exceptional acting teachers that came out of the group. They were influenced by the Moscow Art Theater. So it was Lee Strasberg, Robert Lewis, Sanford Meisner, and Stella Adler. And Kazan taught for a little while, but not that long. And Meisner was trying to figure out a way how to get actors to stop thinking, how he could hone the instincts and remove the intellectual thought process from the work. So he began to develop what he called the repetition exercises. It's really a bit difficult to describe it in an interview like this. It's something that really has to be experienced, but the basis of it is that 2 students, it begins with 2 students sitting opposite one another and repeating verbatim what they hear and repeating back and forth exactly what they hear. It starts with what we call the first thing exercise. So for example, a teacher sits opposite the students, and let's say I'm working with you, and I put my attention on the teacher, and when the teacher says go, without thinking, I turn to you and I pick up the first thing on or about you that I see. For example, I would say glasses, and then you would repeat back glasses. And we would continue to do that without adding a thing to the exercise. No acting, just learning to work from what we call our truthful selves. And that's the beginning of learning how to hone and develop the instincts. Because all acting is working off of an object of your behavior. So you have to learn how to be in the moment, stay in the moment, work off, and of course, listen. Listening is key. Because if you don't know how to listen, you can't react.
Yeah. I've done a little bit of acting in my life, and I can say from my experience that the majority of the time, I definitely feel like I do have trouble just pure reacting, because you're always in your head and you're wondering what the other actor's doing, and I totally see where the method's going, because it forces you to just be like, no, just you and the scene, you and the person, you and the object, and it's not about any biases, any pre-thought out thing you want to do.
No, it's not. It's about learning how to live in the moment. Meisner's definition of acting is living truthfully in a given set of imaginary circumstances. So the key there is that you have to learn to live, to be in the moment, to be right here, right now at all times, and of course connect with your partner.
Yeah.
So repeating back and forth eliminates thinking. There's nothing to think about.
Yeah.
You know, once you get to the point of view exercise, for example, let's say I'm starting in point of view, which is responding from my truthful point of view, how I feel about something. And I look at you and I say, I like your shirt. And you repeat back in the point of view, you like my shirt. Yes, I like your shirt. You like my shirt. I like your shirt. You like my shirt. It's a nice shirt. I know, you told me. Yes, I told you. You told me. You sound impatient. I am impatient. I'm annoying you. Yes, you're annoying me. You follow? So there's no thought process there, and what you're doing is you're removing any impediments, any blocks that get in the way of working impulsively, what Meisner called the actor's instinct.
Wow, that's so cool, and it's really deep, and it shows because I think until people have acted, they don't realize how much work it is, right? You think, yeah, you know, I'll just be myself, I care, and then you realize, oh shit, man, it's really, really difficult to act. I'm just being honest. It's really difficult to act. That's why we have people like you teaching us how to be in the moment.
Yeah, well, it's different. You know, we take for granted what we do every day in life. We take for granted and we assume, I think I would have to say wrongly, that if I can react and respond in my everyday life, that means I can act. And that's the furthest thing from the truth, because acting is the craft, it's a skill. Michael Caine was asked at one point about talent. And Caine said he doesn't concern himself with talent. He considers himself a professional and he knows how to act. And I interpreted that as Caine telling us that it's a skill, that you have to know how to work on a script, that you have to know how to bring yourself to the work. Yes, of course, talent is involved. I'm not negating talent, but we cannot minimize what it means to be a skilled actor, an actor that has craft. Brando had both. He had immense talent, but he was also a very, very skilled craftsman.
I've heard Marlon Brando's scene from On the Waterfront, where he's talking about, oh, he could have been a contender. Apparently that was all improvised.
No, that particular scene wasn't improvised. That particular scene was scripted. What it was that initially in the scene, Charlie the Gent, it was Rod Steiger played his brother. Charlie the Gent pulls a gun on him, and Kazan wanted Brando, Terry Malloy, to respond angrily, you know, that his brother had pulled a gun on him. And Brando, who was, as Kazan said, he was one of the 3 geniuses he had ever worked with, Brando said, no, this guy is my brother. I wouldn't react in anger. I would be horrified at the fact that my own brother would pull a gun on me. And then Brando's choice was to shame his brother. And it really is quite a brilliant choice. One of those things, again, it's very easy to take for granted what Brando does, but if you watch him closely enough, you'll see that he is one of a kind.
Interesting. And talking about Brando, since we're on the topic, when I was in college, I had an acting coach who told me that, or not an acting coach, just I took an acting class in college, and she told me that A Streetcar Named Desire, the scene where Brando's character, Stanley Kowalski, I think is the character he plays. Kowalski first tells Stella's sister that Stella's pregnant. And apparently, if you look at the actual script, it's more like a scheming thing where it's like, well, by the way, your sister's pregnant, so lay off it. But apparently, from what my acting teacher said, the way Brando played it was more almost like he kind of brought it up unaware. Like he was very. So what my acting teacher said was that Brando didn't deliver that line in that scene well. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh, I mean, I don't think I would agree with that particular take on it. I think Brando's coming from a place in discovering. You're always, as Kazan said, character is not abstract. Character is inside of you, not outside of you. So in discovering parts of Stanley that he identified with, you can see, quite frankly, if you watch closely, that Stanley is a very, very self-involved person. Stanley virtually thinks about Stanley. He's a person that's very certain about everything he says and does. He's a man that has no doubts. So in that particular moment, he's reacting to her impulsively. He's reacting to her in the moment. He has no control over the things that he says and does to some extent. You know, if you watch the movie, right, he's very impulsive about slapping his wife on the butt in front of company, right? Throwing the radio out the window, reacting with rage and punching his wife, right? And then pleading like a child for forgiveness. So if you watch the movie carefully, you see that he has embodied who Stanley Kowalski is based on the writing. Brando said after he had read for Tennessee Williams, and Williams loved his reading. He said he'd never seen anything like it. And people asked Brando about it. He said, my interpretation of the character was a compilation of Tennessee's words in my imagination. Brando was a very instinctive actor. He worked from instinct. He was not a thinker.
I see.
He's a very bright man, a very well-read man, but in terms of the craft, he knew the dangers of thinking.
Yeah, makes sense. I remember I was acting in this little Chinese movie, and there's a scene where I'm like the restaurant manager and the head chef. It's like a scene between me, the head chef, and the main character, the protagonist, this girl. And the guy who plays the head chef is like, oh, okay, here's what I think I'm gonna do in the scene. And then I'm sitting, I'm like, okay, I'll play along with this. So I was like, okay, so you're gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. But then once the camera comes up, it's like, no, none of that happens, right? Because we're trying to think, but that's not how we're actually gonna react. So I think I kind of gave another example illustrating your point.
Well, I think if you've decided what you're going to do before it happens, right, then it's a predetermined response to something that hasn't happened yet. And that's the antithesis of living in the moment, isn't it?
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know right now, you're interviewing me, but I don't know what you're going to say next or what you're going to do next. So I'm not anticipating what question is coming next. So in that sense, we're connecting and we're living right here, right now, in this moment, aren't we?
Exactly. And
there's nothing really to think about.
Exactly. And for me, when I decided to plan this interview out, I thought about maybe 2 topics and that's it. I didn't really think about every question because I know the conversation's supposed to flow naturally.
Right. You know, I mean, we may end up talking about the Mets and the Yankees or the Dodgers. Who knows what we end up talking about?
Exactly.
I mean, the people that are tuned in, they may be more interested in acting, so it's probably wise of us to stick to that. But who knows what's going to come up, right?
Yep. I used to be a journalist, and I had this one case where I was interviewing. She was like a healthcare professional, like a doctor or something, and she already planned out everything she wanted to say, regardless of what question I was going to ask. So I asked a question about something. Somehow she jumped to that topic and talked for 5 minutes about that topic. And by the end of that, I'm like, I feel like I'm not really getting through to her. And she has. So yeah, it's not just for acting. It's also for if you ever just want to have a good conversation with someone. Don't plan out too much stuff. I think that's a good life lesson.
Yeah, I think it's more fun to do what we're doing now and just 2 people talking. Whatever comes up, right? What could possibly go wrong? What can we do wrong? I mean, right and wrong doesn't really have any part in the conversation.
Exactly. Exactly. So my question that just came to mind is, all these actors that have trained in the Meisner method, let's say now they have a scene on CSI or they have a scene on a soap opera, do they, right before the scene, do all these warm-up exercises in the Meisner method to prepare themselves? Or are they kind of, by the time they're in this, they're ready to act in the scene, they're already so learned that they don't have to warm up or anything like that?
Well, you got people like, for example, Robert Duvall, Gregory Peck, Mary Steenburgen, Francis Sternhagen, and I could go on and on and on, Joanne Woodward. They studied with Sanford Meisner at the Neighborhood Playhouse. So they spent 2 years in this program learning how to listen and work off of the object of their behavior. Now, that's something you're working on as an actor for the rest of your life. The foundation is the 2-year program, but there's not a good actor alive that isn't constantly working on developing those skills, because it's so important to help you be in the moment. Again, right here, right now. But in the Meisner technique, what you're doing before you go in front of the camera, depending upon what's required of you, or on stage, you are doing an emotional preparation for what we call the first moment. And in the Meisner school, you're learning how to use your imagination, which is basically learning how to daydream. Mm-hmm. You're learning how to do something that is now voluntary as opposed to involuntary. And what I mean by that is, you, me, whoever can be walking down the street, we drift off into a daydream, right? Now, you know that when you're daydreaming, right, there's a certain part of you that loses control of the daydream. The daydream is doing you. You're not doing it, right?
Yeah.
But that's in our everyday lives. Well, now, when you're getting paid to do a specific job, which is to act and come on camera emotionally full or come on stage emotionally full, now you have to learn how, we call it generating a point of view from a reason. Now you have to learn how to generate an emotion that's required of you when you come on stage. So that's what a Meisner actor would be doing. They would be doing their emotional preparation. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't be doing repetition exercises as a means of warming up.
Interesting. And is it difficult to do the emotional preparation? Like, how long does it take for a normal actor, or does it really depend on individual actors?
It really is a very, very individual thing. And in terms of difficulty, I can tell you this. Meisner's got a wonderful book, Sanford Meisner on Acting. And in that book, if I could find the page for you, I'd read it to you. But you'll have to trust my memory on this, that Meisner did not like emotional preparation. And my contention is that he didn't like it because it's very, very difficult to do. And you have to be very patient with the students. I'm not a stern taskmaster. That's not how I teach. I think I can get more out of people by breaking down their barriers, by making them laugh and loosen them up, than by cracking a whip and threatening or warning. That's not my style. I don't adhere to it. I personally have to like it. But it's very difficult for students to learn how to daydream. And we do that emotional preparation exercise in conjunction with the independent physical activity in the Meisner technique. I don't want to get too technical, I don't want to alienate the audience. I'm sure my New York accent is already alienating enough people. I don't need to add to it by getting hyper technical. But it is very difficult, and you make a very good point that it's a very, very individual thing. What may be a little easier for you may be more difficult for someone else, and vice versa. So each individual has their own challenges and hurdles that they have to get past in order how to learn to do effective emotional preparation.
I see. And talking about sort of individuals and challenges, besides learning to not think and get in the moment, what are some common other challenges that you see a lot in actors you coach? Let's say whether they're starting out or whether they're more experienced.
Well, I would say, the main thing, of course, is teaching them how to be in the moment. That's challenging. And I find it very exciting. I love working with new people. I don't care whether you're a ranked beginner or a professional, and I've worked with both working actors and people that start out that can't walk and chew gum at the same time. And I think one of the challenges for all these young people, and it was for me too when I was studying the technique, is learning what Meisner called learning to take the polite routine out of your work. In life, we're taught, I know all of us have been taught things like, don't sit that way, why are you doing this, why are you doing that, what made you say a thing like that, what's the matter with you, don't you think before you speak? Well, all of a sudden we've built up all these defenses and we've built up all these barriers and all this, we've got this baggage that we take with us, and when we get into the technique class, we have to strip all of that away. We have to get rid of it so that we can be in the moment, so that we're not censoring anything we do or say. The only rule I have, hard and fast rule in my classes, is that you are not allowed to touch anyone in anger. Nobody is allowed to lay hands on another person. So you have to learn how to express your anger in a different way. But I still want people, I don't care what language they use, language should not be a barrier to the truth. So these are challenges that all actors face. Learning to be in the moment, take the polite routine out of your work, stay out of your head. And through that process, you begin to see, which is a really wonderful thing to see, where the students become more physical in their choices. I don't mean physical, again, in terms of pushing or shoving or hitting. I mean that all of a sudden their bodies are getting into the act.
I see.
One thing I'd like to add, I do a lot of reading. I really enjoy reading, and I feel it's very helpful as a teacher because I come away learning a lot of things about a lot of different actors. And I remember reading a bio on the great Montgomery Clift. He's a wonderful actor. And he had been in a couple of movies with Elizabeth Taylor. And they were working on a scene, and she was having some difficulty in the scene. And Montgomery Clift turned to her and said, Elizabeth, your body doesn't know you're acting. And that is a wonderful lesson for anybody that wants to learn to be an effective actor. Okay, your body is way ahead of your brain.
Wow. And I've read many books that say 70% of communication's in your body. So if your body doesn't know you're acting, then your body, you need to get your body congruent with whatever you're feeling.
You have to follow your body in a sense. You find the meanings to the moments through your body, not through your head, right? So, for example, like you and I are talking, let's just say, and you have a certain gesture or a look on your face that I pick up, and I say to you spontaneously, Jerry, what's wrong? And I had a bad day. Well, what made me say to you, Jerry, what's wrong? You didn't tell me something's wrong.
Exactly.
You didn't say a word. I just picked up your body language, tone of voice, facial expression. So once you learn to be completely attentive, where you're taking the whole person in, certainly you're listening to the words and you're listening to the tone of voice, but I'm watching you and I'm connected to you. And if I'm connected to you, then I can begin to really react.
Yeah. Wow.
I can't react if all my attention is on me.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And I've taken improv classes, and it's basically one of the biggest lessons is not only do you pay attention to other people, you try to give them stuff too. In improv, you try to give them stuff to bounce off. You don't try to take care of yourself. You take care of them, and then by taking care of them, they'll take care of you.
Well, I studied with Suzanne Shepard for a short period of time, and wonderful teacher, and she studied with Sanford Meisner. And she used to tell us all the time, good actors are generous actors.
Mm-hmm.
Good actors are generous actors. So yeah, you're 100% right. If I want to get something from you, I have to give something to you. Right? The Beatles had that wonderful line in their song. They sing at the end, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make.
Yeah.
So isn't that true?
Yeah.
In that sense, aren't we making love by giving to one another and then being able to take from one another, right? It's got that almost that tennis ball match kind of
exactly.
quality where we just keep hitting the ball back and forth and keep it going.
Exactly. So the thing that came to mind is, there's also Stanislavski method, right? There's like Meisner, Stanislavski. What are some general differences between people who do Stanislavski versus Meisner?
Well, everything's derivative. I mean, I think Stanislavski, well, I know Stanislavski, he's the one that came up with the system.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was the 19th century, right? He founded the Moscow Art Theater. And I think initially, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm no expert on this, it's been a while since I read An Act Prepares, which is certainly a wonderful book for people to read if they want to get to know Stanislavski's system a little bit better. But I know that initially, Stanislavski had come up with the effective memory exercises and the sense memory exercises. And that's how the group theater started out. They got that from him.
Mm-hmm.
That was Strasberg's cup of tea, so to speak. So though the effective memory and the sense memory is completely different than what Meisner does. Totally different. Because Meisner's technique, as I said, is about listening and being right here, right now. He doesn't utilize any of that. Stella Adler was very, very opposed to those exercises because she felt it was bringing psychotherapy into the theater. And that was one of the big rifts they had in the group theater, because Stella went to France and she met with Stanislavski, and she was very upset with the effective memory exercises. Now, I'm not knocking it. I don't want to disparage what other teachers do or what other actors do, because you do what works for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever works for you, you do.
Yeah.
So I'm not one to flush the work, 100 years of work down the toilet because it's not my way of working. Like I say, if it works for you, do it by all means.
Yeah.
It wasn't working for her. And when she met with Stanislavski, she was upset about that particular part of his method. And he told her, he said, well, I don't do that anymore. Let's sit down and talk. He had begun to work with the imagination because as Meisner said, the imagination is more immediate, right? We're not trying to remember something that happened 20 years ago or conjure up the feelings from an experience we had 20 years ago. So my imagination is far more immediate than the past. My imagination is powerful, right? It's infinite. It has no boundaries. Plus, it's not logical. Right? There's no logic in art, really, when you think about it. Right? There's no logic in emotions. You're doing an emotional preparation. It's coming out of fantasy. It's not logical. It's where your mind will take you, where your imagination can take you.
Yeah. So
those are basic differences. Stanislavski had something, as I recall, which I thought was terrific. He had this technique that he used with actors where they would create a circle for themselves, an imaginary circle, where nobody was allowed into the circle in a sense, which was, the goal of which was to get the actor to live privately in a public situation.
Oh.
But again, I'm far from the expert on this particular area of acting. It's not something that I work with, so I think there would be other teachers that teach Stanislavski's method that would be much more articulate in describing exactly what he did.
Wow.
But he was a great teacher and a wonderful actor and director.
Yeah, because when I took that acting class back in college, the teacher she taught a lot of kind of Stanislavski derived methods. Like I think her main source of not inspiration, but I guess her main source of guide was a person named Uta Hagen, who I guess studied. Yeah, she studied under Stanislavski, I believe. So during her class, I just remember, it's been 5 years since I've taken that class, but time goes by quickly, by the way. Wow. But
too quickly.
Yeah, too quickly, man. But I remember half the class, a lot of times we'd be on the floor and just listening. So we'd practice listening to the different sounds, or we'd do breathing exercises. And then she taught us about substitutions, like you said, like taking stuff from your childhood and substituting it based on the feelings and the roles into like people that you're supposed to react out of. So it's like very interesting, and I can see it's very different.
Yeah, there are differences, and we call them emotional parallels, where you're finding something from your life that parallels a specific moment or a beat that you're working on in the scene. It's reflective of something that you've experienced in life. Everybody has to remember that that's acting, and Ray Bradbury talks about this in his amazing book, Zen and the Art of Writing, that we human beings have stored within us every experience we've ever had. It's all there.
Yeah.
Everything we've ever done or said or experienced is living inside of us, and by removing, and he had, rest his soul, he worked similarly as a writer, by removing this thought process, we're tapping into the subconscious. As a matter of fact, Ray Bradbury said in the last chapter that I read that he used free association exercises to open himself up, to stimulate his imagination, to tap into his subconscious. Wow. He called the subconscious the muse. That's the muse. Yeah.
Yeah, and from a neuroscience angle, even if the connections aren't currently activated, they're still there. That's what most people, that's why habits are so hard to die, because something might trigger the neuron to fire again because the connection's there. It's very hard to destroy the actual connection that formed whatever experience, whatever memory, whatever action. So absolutely. I mean, neuroscience is giving credence to all these sort of like terms that they use, like subconscious, etc.
Well, we all know, I think, or I think we all know or will learn that it's harder to unlearn than it is to learn.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's harder to give up smoking than it is to start smoking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like you just said, old habits die hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the wonderful thing about acting, I think, is that it is inside of you, and it's all there in your memory bank, your vault, just waiting for you to tap into it.
Yeah. Agreed. There's I remember I did a short science fiction film in 2015, and there was one moment where me and the main character, we both tapped into, like, it was a genuine moment of connection, and I was like, wow, that's what acting's about. It was the first time when we were reading our lives when both of us felt like, wow, we really actually felt the emotion. We're genuinely in the moment, and it's like that's beautiful. And people maybe who don't understand why actors do it, some actors do it for fame, but I think most actors do it for those moments when you're like, wow, I completely got lost in this scene and I completely created a new reality.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's very, very exciting for you, for the actor, when they are growing and learning and they start connecting, and all of a sudden there's this exchange of energy and the emotions become very organic. You're not pushing, you're not trying to make anything happen. It's all there from you. It's coming out of, as you say, that connection to the other person, that exchange of energy, and it's a wonderful feeling. Yeah. It's a wonderful feeling, and I happen to agree with you. I would say that, Lord knows I haven't done the interviews, but I'd be willing to bet that the vast majority of people that get into acting do so because they have a calling. They have a need to express themselves in this way. Perhaps they're natural born storytellers. They may not be writers, they may not be singers, They may not be musicians, but this is the way they communicate. This is the way they tell stories. This is the way they channel their emotions. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, agreed. Now, this question comes from my personal experience, which is that when I was a sophomore in college, I signed up for the acting class, and I don't know why I got intimidated and I dropped the class. So that gives the question, I think, is on a lot of people's mind. If someone wants to start acting or wants to start exploring this part of the arts, what are some sort of advice you would give them? How do they find the right teacher? How do they not be intimidated? How do they find the right classes?
Okay, well, first of all, let me tell you about my experience in my first legitimate acting class. So I can tell you this. I was scared to death. I was taking a train into Manhattan. I was walking down the street talking to myself. What am I doing? Am I out of my mind? My palms are sweaty. My heart is pounding 1,000 beats a minute. I must be crazy. Why am I doing this? Then when I got into the class and I started to work, I realized, yes, I want to be here. Now I know why I'm here. So as far as being intimidated, there's no antidote for the fear that you experience when you go to your first acting class. I've never met anybody that wasn't afraid when they started their first acting class, that wasn't anxious, that wasn't trembling, if not outwardly, inwardly. Okay, I've never met anybody. Maybe they're out there. I'm not saying they can't be out there, but for the most part, I've read stories about Harvey Keitel, who stood outside the studio for over an hour before he walked in. He was so terrified about taking his first acting class. So I think that comes with the territory. I think it's a nerve-wracking experience, and I think you just have to go through the fear. I don't know that that's the greatest advice in the world. I don't know if that helps anyone, but if it does, you have to just walk through the fear. You can't let the fear deter you. Otherwise, you won't do it. You'll give in to the fear and you'll walk away.
Yeah.
As far as choosing a teacher, I've talked about this at length. Okay? I have my own criteria. I had my own criteria when I was choosing teachers. First and foremost, I feel that the teacher has to be knowledgeable and intelligent. The teacher has to have communication skills. You go into a classroom, you want to know what the teacher's talking about. And if you have a question, you want the teacher to be able to answer the question coherently. Not a lot of gobbledygook, specific feedback for a specific question.
Yeah.
I personally never responded well to bullies. I don't care how good the teacher is. I just gave you some criteria, but I don't care how good the teacher is, how well they communicate, or how intelligent they are. If they're nasty, and if they're bullies, and if they're verbally abusive, I want no part of them. That's me. That's not an environment that I feel is conducive to learning.
Yeah.
So when I created my classes, my studio back in '88, and I didn't have to think about this because this is who I am. Okay, that might sound boastful. I don't think I'm boasting, but I'm just saying that I enjoy people. I enjoy being around people. I love my students. They keep me sharp. They keep me in the moment. They keep me stimulated. They keep me young. And I love when they ask me questions. I love pointing things out to them. I believe that I'm coherent, that I can communicate well, but I never stop asking them, have I made myself clear? Is there anyone, do you want to ask me anything else? Did I explain that coherently, specifically? So I think these are very, very, very important qualities for a teacher. And what I recommend is that students that are starting out, you may get referrals from your friends. I went to so-and-so, I went to him, I went to her. I highly recommend that you sample a few classes, not one or two. And I suggest that you go in there with a journal, notebook, and take notes. And jot down, what did you like about the teacher? What impressed you about him? What was the environment like? What were the other students like? Was there a warmth in the room? Were people receptive? Did they work well with one another, or was it so competitive that you could cut the tension with a knife? I think these are all very, very important criteria for choosing a teacher, because remember, in the end, the teacher is choosing the student is choosing the teacher.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street.
Exactly. Yeah. So such great advice, man. And especially, I love what you said about the energy of the room. You know, look, I've been in classes where I try to start conversation with someone else who's in the class, and they kind of like, they don't want to talk to me. And I'm like, I thought we were supposed to all help each other. So I definitely know what you mean. There's definitely sometimes, if you like that sort of tension, if it gets you going, then yes. But for me, I don't like that kind of tension. So yes, I guess you would also have to figure out what kind of vibe you like, and then it'll help you determine what types of vibes in different classes you would fit in best.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as soon as somebody walks into my classroom, whether they're auditing or they're starting, I introduce them to everybody in the room, and I say, introduce yourselves to Jerry starting with us today. Mm-hmm. My students are wonderful people. I don't see any downside to being gracious. I just don't. Mm-hmm. Now, you're not coming to class to make friends. That's not the goal.
Exactly.
All right? But that doesn't mean you won't.
Exactly.
Or that it's not a good thing, or that you won't be able to start up your own little network of actors where you can help one another. Okay, nothing wrong with that. But the primary purpose of taking an acting class is to learn a specific craft. However, what is agreeable about being in a class with people that where you feel like you're in a fraternity and you're going through a hazing process?
Exactly.
It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't want to be in a class like that. You know, what are we competing for? The teacher's love and affection? Is this a daddy and mommy situation? Are you threatened by my presence? Am I threatened by your presence? I mean, that to me is just a waste of energy.
Agreed. So what are some students you're working with now that, let's say, our audience would potentially know or have potentially seen on the show or something like that?
Well, I've worked, I haven't worked with her in a while, but I've worked with Lauren Velez on many occasions. Mm-hmm. She's a wonderful person and a wonderful actor. I love working with her. Mm-hmm. I've worked with Sonia Sohn over the years many times. She was on The Wire. She played Lieutenant Kima Greggs. I worked many times with Lou Martini Jr., who does a lot of work. He's a very fine character actor. Mm-hmm. And then some of my lesser-known students. I have people out there that are not household names, but they're working. Ivan Goris, Christian Cordula, who's actually out on the coast. He's been doing a Tyler Perry show for quite some time now. One of my students who's back here in the East End, Marie Hagenars, is getting a lot of work right now. And I'm very proud of the accomplishments that my students have made. Mm-hmm. I recently worked with a couple of guys that were referred by an agent here in New York City that are doing quite well. And, certainly we in this business that are teachers are going to be judged by who we've worked with, and I totally understand that. But there are successes that are not household names.
Of course.
There are people that you work with that may not be Academy Award winners, but they're still earning their living acting, and I think if you're a working actor, you are a huge success.
Absolutely. I totally second that. Because it's so hard, it's so competitive. So if you can make your living just doing what you love, then you're totally a success. I totally agree.
Absolutely. 100%.
So my last question would be, what is your plan now for your, you have an establishment in New York. Do you want to expand elsewhere, or do you think New York's just the place for you?
Well, ideally, I would love to be able to teach classes periodically in different parts of the country or overseas. Mm-hmm. If I got a call from somebody that said, we'd like you to teach a class in England, or we'd like you to teach a class in LA or Chicago or Miami or wherever it is, sure, I would love to do that. I mean, I would never close down my studio. That's my main thing here in New York. But to be able to teach, whether it's Canada or wherever, I wouldn't care, China, anywhere. I love to teach, and I would love to be exposed to different students that always are eager to learn. You know, the old expression is when the student is ready, the teacher will come.
Yeah.
So I'm here if you need me.
That's right. And the other thing I wanted to bring up was, for those of you who don't know, I discovered Alan through social media. I think it was one of those acting groups, and I think it was his assistant or something advertised it, and that's how I found him. This was 2014, and so, you know, with social media now, I think you're going to reach more and more people, and then, you know, you never know. You one day maybe my cousins in China will take lessons from you and stuff. That'll be so cool.
I'm game, as they say. Look, you know, teaching is a passion of mine. I love to do it. As I said, I enjoy always working with new people, and sure, I would love to be, you know, expand my studio in the future and work with as many people as I possibly can. But in the meantime, you know, my studio is doing well. I'm happy to be taking on new students. September is rolling around, and more people will be in the city, and more people will enroll. So I'm excited about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this question actually just popped up to my mind. It's kind of a little unrelated, but so, you know, every director, every person talks about how sometimes it's a little hard for actors who are used to acting on the stage to transfer to acting for the sake of the camera. Do you have actors, or have you coached actors into transition, whether from stage to on camera, from more primarily camera acting to stage?
Yeah, well, for me, again, I mean, the craft is the craft, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're learning the craft of acting, and when you've developed the craft, then you'll be able to make the adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
Brando started out on the stage. I mean, there are so many actors I could mention to you. It came from the stage. You know, first of all, stage is the tradition in England, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody does stage acting there, and Michael Caine did stage acting, Laurence Olivier, John Gielgud, Sir Ralph Richardson, Judi Dench, Dame Mae Whitty. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Alan
Mm-hmm.
Bates. Here in this country, if you just look at the original 1947 production of Streetcar Named Desire, Brando was a stage actor, Malden was a stage actor, Jessica Tandy, Tim Hunter, even the lesser known actors that were in that production, Rudy Bond, Nick Dennis, Peg Hilliard, right? These are people that all came from the stage. Now, yes, there are adjustments that you have to make. Michael Caine, in his book on acting, he made a wonderful comment. Well, probably he made thousands of wonderful comments in that terrific book. He said that he likened stage acting to performing surgery with a scalpel, and film acting to performing surgery with a laser.
Oh, man.
So the thing that you have to remember that, Kazan said this, my favorite director. In his autobiography, Elia Kazan, who directed Marlon Brando on stage in Streetcar, he directed him in the film version of Streetcar, Viva Zapata, on the waterfront, okay? Kazan said that the camera is a lie detector that pierces the husk of the actor.
Oh.
So you cannot fake emotion on camera. Meisner said a similar thing. He said, you cannot fake emotion. So when the emotion isn't there, you have to do what you're doing as truthfully as you can. So yes, stage definitely is broader. There's no question about that. So when you move from stage to film and you're working on camera, you have to pare the performance down. Less is more. Mm-hmm. Less is more. Because once they have you in close-up, any false move you make is magnified. I mean, your head is as big as the Grand Canyon on the screen, right?
Yeah.
So if you start face acting or indicating in any way, it's going to pick it up and it's going to expose you, right? It picks up, I mean this, take this in the context in which I'm saying it, it exposes any lie you tell.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So that to me is the difference. But Kane also said, which is something for your listeners, if they're still there, I hope they are, he said that the one thing that never gets compromised between stage acting and film acting is your intensity. The intensity is the same. Paring down the performance is one thing, but the intensity that you bring to the moment is not compromised.
I see. That's very that's a really great point, and I never thought about it like that. But yeah, that actually makes sense because when I did that little sci-fi short film back in the day, I would, I knew I had to pare down my acting a little, but I think that probably made me emotionally not as intense in certain scenes. So I totally that's I wish I heard Michael Caine say that before.
Well, it all comes back to, again, there is that learning of the craft, learning how to leave yourself alone is a big thing. Yeah. Putting your attention on the other person, because as soon as you begin to try to do anything, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay, Meisner's first rule is don't do anything until something happens to make you do it. Yeah. That's his first rule. Now, I read a spectacular book by Alan Arkin called An Improvised Life. And if I'm doing justice to Mr. Arkin's book, and I hope I am, that he talked about when he was in Second City, that famous improv group in Chicago. He said one of the most important lessons he ever learned was to stop trying. Don't try to be funny, don't try to be witty, don't try to be sad, don't try to be angry, don't try. Learn what it means to be in the moment. Yeah. And I could say this, easy to say, very difficult to learn. Yeah. What we call getting out of our own way, leaving ourselves alone. Yeah. We are our own worst enemies when it comes to that. That's why it's a craft. Yeah. And you brought it up earlier, Jerry. You said that's why people train, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not everyday life.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just thinking about cultural differences too. Let's say one day you teach in China, for example. China's a culture that's a lot about image and face, so it's all about trying, right? It's all about trying to put on something. So I wonder if actors in China, I would have to talk to some actors in China, I do know a few, but I wonder if that initial phase of breaking down their sort of their habits, was that a little harder for them, just because their Chinese society is so much about, okay, even if I'm not doing anything, even if I don't have anything, I still have to put this image, right? So I'm just thinking out loud right now.
I think you make a fantastic point. I think you hit on something there, absolutely, when you said cultural, right? I mean, we are different, aren't we? We have certain aspects, let's say, of our temperament that are the product of cultures that we are born into, isn't it? Yeah. So again, I have to say that where certain aspects of technique might be more difficult for me because of who I am and where I come from, then other aspects will be more difficult for you because of who you are and where you come from and how much freedom were you given as a child to express yourself. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean freedom with boundaries. Yeah. Don't get me off on that tangent. I don't mean freedom where I'm on a New York subway and some kid has his foot in my mouth because his parent hasn't taught him how to sit on the subway train, right? So I got his foot in my mouth, in my ear, in my eyes. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about how we are raised absolutely makes an impact on us. Yeah. And since we are unique and we're all individuals, we're going to bring those experiences into everything we do. Yeah. So I think that's a wonderful point that you make, right? Mm-hmm. How do people get past certain obstacles that are a product of their culture?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I remember one time I sat down with a friend from college. I hadn't seen him in many years. And I guess he forgot how excited I get sometimes. So he's like, because at that point, I'm still working at a Chinese company. That's my day job. But he didn't know that yet. So he's like, hey Jerry, if you ever work for a Chinese company, because he's from China, he's working at Google now, but he's originally from China. And he's like, Jerry, if you ever work for a Chinese company, you have to tone down your excitedness level. And I'm like, hey, very Chinese, because in Chinese culture, in schools, the excited kid probably get yelled at by the teacher. Hey, sit in your seat, man. Be like the other kids. Read.
Yeah, people are gonna, if they haven't seen you, they're gonna listen to you and they're gonna go, "You Chinese?"
Yeah, exactly. They're like,
Chinese?
You don't see him or talk like it. Exactly.
But it just goes to show you, right? It's all about temperament, where we've come from, and we are different, right? And there you go with you just brought up, like in a sense, the stereotype, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're Chinese, Asian, there are certain stereotypes. If you're Jewish, there are stereotypes. If you're Italian, there are stereotypes, right? We have to get past that.
Yeah.
We have to get past that and learn to deal with individuals.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess
that's.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's what I love about my classes are multicultural. Yeah. And I love that. I'm working with a wide variety of different people. So I get to each one. The goal is the same. The goal is to get them out of their own way.
Yeah, exactly.
Doesn't matter who you are. It's to get you to be alive, living in the moment, right? Listening and reactive without trying to do anything. It doesn't matter where you're from. You could be from Pluto. It would be the same goal. Yeah. Let's get these people to listen.
Agreed. So, lessons, man. Listen. Be in the moment. Get out of your own way.
There you go.
So Alan, I think I'm going to stop the interview here. This is a pretty good point, and I would love to bring you back in the future. So if you're down, we can in the future schedule another interview. Could talk about other things. Let's say maybe during Oscar season or something, we could have another talk.
I would love to. I really appreciate you having me on. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed talking to you and seeing you again after so long. Yeah. And I had a blast. This was a ball.
Definitely.
And like we said right at the beginning, just two people talking to one another without a script.
Exactly. And learning. I learned a lot from you, and that's how you learn. You have to just drop all your biases, drop everything, and just listen.
You got it. I'm with you 100%. Definitely. Thanks for your time, Jerry. This was great.
Definitely.
And please have me back. I would love to.
Definitely. And for those of you watching, what I'll do is I'll link Alan's website. I'll link everything so you guys can follow him on Facebook. You guys could do all that stuff. He has a YouTube channel too, so I'll link that. And all of you watching, please go follow him, press like always on my videos, leave a comment. If you have any questions, feel free to. Is it okay if they ask you some questions in the comment section, and I could always pass the questions your way?
I would love it. I love questions. I'd love to interact with your listeners, and if they have anything that they'd like me to elaborate on, by all means, please contact me. I would love it.
Yeah, and since Alan has a YouTube channel, you can actually just reply to them directly in the comment section. So if they ask any questions to you, I'll make you like automatically approved, so you can just reply right as much as you want without YouTube's annoying filter picking you up and being like, oh, that might be spam.
Oh, okay, that sounds great. I'm going to leave the technical end of it to you.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'm a Neanderthal when it comes to that stuff.
Exactly. So I'll just give my audience one last. This is Alan, by the way.
Thank you all for joining us. I enjoyed the interview very much. I hope to be talking with Jerry again really soon.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.